Being a passenger when I'm driving is nothing to worry about. I know what I'm doing. Oh, about that. I guess we'll have to go back to the beginning to see how we got here. So I joined an online race in Le Mans Ultimate in the GT3 Beginner Series. And I'm stressing Beginner Series here because the trouble already started when I went out on track for qualifying. Because my dash showed me wet. And I was like, what? Wet? How can that be? So I went back to the garage to check if that was actually true. And yeah, it shows 40% wet on the track. And the game sent me out on mediums. So luckily I noticed and then went out on wets again, and qualifying did go okay, though it was kind of sketchy still because I wasn't used to driving in the wet. Managed to qualify P5 and, well, then went to the race start. And I really didn't know what to expect. So let's see how this all went.
Green flag, green flag.
And we're off the line with a good start, I would say. And I have to lift a little bit here because the BMW in front didn't have that great of a start and I really didn't find any way to properly get by here. And then carnage already unfolded. There was already something that happened. It was kind of hard to see, so let's check the replay. Because you can see into turn 1 here that there will be contact, I think, but it's kind of hard to tell if that was actually the cause of it. Look at the BMW. It looks like he spun on his own, but then got hit by another car behind. And that's not all of it. You can see some bumping going on in the back with the Porsche hitting the wall there. That was already a spicy start, and I was lucky that I managed to avoid all of that. It was close in the beginning. But, well, I find myself in P4, so already gained a position, and I was kind of happy that that all went well. And I was now just trying to settle in to hopefully get a good race in here. Once again with the focus of getting safety rating, because that is what I'm trying to do at the moment, because I want to have more options in the multiplayer of Le Mans Ultimate, for which I need safety rating. I'm still in bronze, so that means only beginner series for me. And to change that we need to have a clean race. And the weather conditions here already kind of threw me off, I have to say. I mean, it's not raining, there's at least that, but the track still is 40% wet at this point. It didn't dry up at all for the race start, so we are once again on wet tires, because on mediums that would have just been really bad. And it seems like basically everyone else also did that choice. I think the 1 or 2 people that really didn't have a great time from what I've seen. It will dry up later on, but still the wet tires are definitely the right choice here. But still, even though we have the wet tires and it's not all that wet, it was still definitely sketchy to drive, and just something that I wasn't used to. I had practiced Sebring a little bit, but not all that much yet. It's a track that I'm not all that familiar with. I have driven it a little bit in other games, but not all that much, and here on Le Mans Ultimate I was just going to single player beforehand and seeing that I can learn the basics of the track. And I was doing fine, but this race really threw me a curveball here. We're doing fine at the moment, and I'm quite happy that nothing happened in the beginning and we are actually in P4 and have a little bit of a gap now to the car behind, and can still kind of keep up with the leading 3, so podium is still in the cards for sure, but you will see that there will still be quite a lot of things happening in this race. So yeah, from the conditions, as I said, 40% wet when it started. It went down to like 5% in the end, I think, so the track was damp in the end, which that might have been a time where then the dry tires, the medium tires would have been the better choice, but it's a short 20-minute race, so going for a pit stop really wouldn't make sense, so we're driving these tires all the way to the end. And tire degradation will play a factor, but also just the track conditions are kind of difficult, at least for me and seemingly also for other people. You will see both the drivers in front of me and maybe also behind sometimes really struggling, because you do have to brake quite a lot earlier than you do in the dry or on dry tires. I'm not quite sure what it exactly is, but at least the combination of the two, I noticed already in qualifying that I needed to brake quite a bit earlier, especially for the heavy braking zones. Otherwise you would just go really wide for some corners. And yeah, you also needed to take things a little bit more careful. Like lap times were at least 5, 6, maybe 7 seconds slower than on a dry track. That's about the ballpark here. We'll see once we get there. I think in the dry I managed in practice to get like a 204.5 or something. Not incredibly fast. I'm still not that great on Sebring, but I was kind of okay with the time that I had there. But in this, I think the best lap was something in the 209s or something. And that's at the end of the race. I think now you can see people doing 211s and me at 2.12. But the first 2 laps went kind of okay. And now we're jumping to the end of the 3rd lap, where I was getting quite close to the BMW in front and really wanted to get a really good run out of the last corner, which is difficult, and then that happened. Didn't feel all that bad while driving, but let's take a look from the outside and you will see how bad that impact actually was, because it wasn't just one, it was multiple, you could see there. And that really wasn't great. I mean, it's still quite early in the race and I do have damage now. You can see that in the bottom right. The diagram is showing yellow in the front. There's probably also some side damage. I mean, I impacted on the side. And for some reason, the rear left tire kept blinking here. And that is something that I noticed at some point and I was super confused. I still don't quite know what that means. If the tire is somehow damaged, because if there's damage on the axle, that will show on the little triangle besides that. That is still okay seemingly, so there must have been some issue with the tire. I didn't notice it massively. I mean, I also didn't have much reference because, as I said, this was my first race situation in these kind of intermediate conditions, with the track being still wet but no rain. Yeah, definitely not something that I was used to, so not quite sure if this impact affected me a lot. But you can see here, I'm struggling, especially out of these slower corners. It was kind of difficult sometimes to keep the car straight. And I noticed that later, and you will see that later. I had traction control still set to the settings that I was using for the dry, which probably wasn't the wisest decision, and I did increase them later on in the race. Because as you saw there, and you will continue to see here, especially out of the slow corners, you really need to be careful. And also just the last corner on this, it's super easy to just have the rear step out or get into a small slide. And if you're not careful, that can end in a big slide as well. But so far so good. We are still keeping our position, though we lost a little bit out to the drivers in front, and the McLaren behind is getting closer. So at this point I was just hoping that I could keep it together. But you can see here, just being on throttle, there were 3 situations in that last corner alone when I stepped on throttle and was just a little bit too much, either throttle or steering angle, and the rear stepped out. But yeah, that was the difficult thing here about this race. It was just keeping the car on track without spinning as well, because the conditions were tricky, at least for me. And for a race where I just wanted to get safety rating, probably wasn't the best thing. And you can see in the top right, the engineer or the overlay now is telling us that the track is drying and it's time to think about dry tires. But I mean, it's the halfway mark, it's 10 minutes left. Going now to the pits and going for dry tires, even if you're like 2-3 seconds faster a lap, that would not be beneficial in the end. I mean, it's over 2 minutes a lap, so what do we have now? Like 5 laps left? You're never gonna catch up the time that you're losing in the pits. So yeah, for these short races, you just have to stick with what you took in the beginning. So I was actually kind of surprised that no one was gambling, or at least very few people were gambling on just taking medium tires. I think most people probably already experienced this race before, or these conditions, and just knew what to do. I was just, from what I saw in qualifying, and then also from what I saw other people taking in terms of tires in the beginning, I was like, I'm just gonna play it safe and also just take the wet tires, and that was definitely the right choice here. And you can see, with good driving here, we are actually managing to gain on the BMW ahead, and also getting a lot better in terms of lap time here. And you can see here that I'm actually increasing the traction control. There are multiple settings in LMU Ultimate, so I increased just the raw traction control, but also the slip angle value, which should allow the car to rotate less before the traction control actually engages. And we'll see if that actually helps. We did jump ahead now a little bit to lap number 9, so should be the second to last lap, because I was actually kind of keeping my position here. Sometimes getting a little bit closer to the BMW in front, sometimes also falling back because I made a mistake. But we were kind of even in terms of lap time. Did gain on the McLaren behind, who is now 3 seconds behind us. So overall, that still it was going good. And yeah, for these probably last 2 laps, I was just trying to keep it safe. I noticed that the rear tires, especially if you take a look at the display in the bottom right, were starting to overheat. Also sometimes the front tires a little bit. So that's because, as I said, you can see in the bottom left, the track now is only damp, and that is where the wet tires really stop working properly. And they start overheating, and then you start sliding even more. So probably the most difficult conditions for these tires in this race were the last 2 laps. But I was doing kind of well here. You can see my best time is a 210.97. And we are actually gaining on that in this lap by almost a second here. If we can nail this last corner, then we will maybe get that down to a second, but the last corner is quite tricky, and I was a little bit early on throttle here, so I had to lift off, and then lost out a little bit again. It definitely could have been a second faster this lap, but still was a 210.13 now. Good time for me, at least. And it was just 1 lap to go, and that meant just keeping it together, hopefully keeping the car in one piece. But if you saw the beginning of the video, you might remember that things didn't pan out the way that I wanted them to. But we'll see how that actually unfolded, because I was getting quite close to the BMW in front, who also probably was struggling on the tires and was maybe keeping it a little bit more safe than I was. I was trying to push here, and you can see I'm getting really close in this braking zone, and actually had a little bit of trouble seeing the apex, but still managed to do fine. And yeah, I was so close, in fact, that it was the last lap. I was like, if I get the chance, I wanna try to go for a move here. Because at this point I somehow forgot the premise in which I started this race. I want to keep my safety rating or improve it. And then this happened. What happened? Let's take a look again. So I did, coming out of that corner or going into the corner, hit the BMW in front a little bit, nothing major. And then going over the curb, I stepped on the throttle a little bit too much. I noticed too late that my car was sliding, and I hit the wall at least 2 times. And now you can see in the bottom right that my front axle is actually broken. So I hit the wall in a way that my steering rack or the front axle now is bent, and I actually have to keep the steering wheel turned a little bit to the right, because that's the way that I only can go forward now. And I was noticing the car really misbehaving now. We were overtaken, sadly, by the McLaren behind now, and I was just hoping that I could get the car over the finish line in one piece. I mean, it's not far now, it's just one more corner. Can we get there? And if we can keep this, we are still in P5, which is where we started, which would be totally fine. But last corner is tricky. But since we have quite a gap to the car behind, I was taking it quite safe here because I didn't want to get another spin or hit a wall in any way. So yeah, you can see really slow through the last corner, but we managed to cross the finish line almost in one piece, but at least without any more incidents, even though the car was pretty much broken. And well, going over the results now, we did stay where we were in terms of where we qualified, so that is fine, but my safety rating really didn't improve the way that I wanted. And that's because not only did we have contact with the BMW in front, which probably wasn't that bad, but it shows here 6 times contact with immovable, which means contact with the wall. And that is something where I'm like, why is it that way? I mean, we've hit the wall 2 times, and the 2 times that we did hit the wall, we probably impacted in quick succession 2-3 times each. And that's probably why it's counted as 6, and that's probably why my safety rating gain was so low. So I was a little bit frustrated with that, but then I remembered it's basically my fault. I was, for that first wall impact, was just my fault because I was trying to push too much through that last corner, and for the last impact I was just in general pushing too much and noticing too late that I lost the car and once again impacted the wall. From a race perspective, it was still fun and definitely, as I said, sketchy, but it was a challenge that I actually enjoyed, and it's something that I hopefully will see more in the future, also with changing conditions. But for a beginner series, this was actually kind of difficult, I have to say. But yeah, that's it for this race. Let me know what you think of it. If you had similar experiences, also let me know in the comments down below. And hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. That always helps me out a lot. But that's it from me. I want to thank you a lot for watching. I've been GT Racing, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.